This is one of those revenge stories revolving around the theme of family drama. The end of the story will bring you a big surprise and unforgettable emotions. If you like these stories of injustice and unexpected reversals, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any interesting videos. I brought her flowers, and she gave me silence. Not grief, not anger. Just silence. It was a cold October afternoon when I drove 5 states to surprise my mother for her 65th birthday. I wore her favorite perfume, carried her favorite lemon tart, and clutched a handmade card filled with words I had rehearsed 100 times. The front porch looked just like I remembered it, painted shutters, wind chimes, the chipped welcome mat I bought her years ago. But when the door creaked open, my mother squinted, then frowned. "Sorry," she said, her voice as firm as stone. "We're only letting in guests today. No strangers." Then she shut the door. Sometimes being erased hurts more than being hated. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I still had the power to rewrite this family script. Before delving into this story full of betrayal and buried truths, let me know where you're watching from. And hit like if you've ever been treated like a stranger in your own home. They say a daughter becomes a mirror to her mother. But what if that mirror is only used to reflect expectations, not affection? I was 9 when I learned how to set a table for 5 with food for 3. After Dad walked out with his gym bag and that hollow promise. "It's not you, Clara." I became the extra pair of hands my mother needed and the voice she didn't want to hear. While other kids played outside or had sleepovers, I was learning how to stretch a dollar and soothe a crying toddler. My little sister Rachel didn't know what it meant to skip dinner so she could have seconds. I did, and I never told her. My mother, Janice Monroe, called it survival. She'd say it with that worn-out sigh between her smokes and her back-to-back night shifts. "Clara, you're good at managing things. I don't know what I'd do without you." But love dressed up as dependence can be a cruel costume. Rachel grew up in a bubble of ballet recitals and glittery stickers. I grew up in the heat of burnt spaghetti and overdue bills. When her soccer cleats went missing, I skipped lunch to buy her a new pair. When I needed a new winter coat, Mom said, "You'll be fine layering." Rachel's still growing. At school, teachers called me so responsible as if it were praise. But responsibility born from necessity isn't noble, it's just invisible labor. And the more I did, the less they seemed to notice. By 16, I was working 25 hours a week at a local diner, tutoring Rachel in algebra, and still pulling straight A's. No one ever asked how I slept. No one noticed when I didn't. At Rachel's middle school graduation, Mom wore pearls and beamed as if she'd done it all herself. At mine, she forgot the date. Once I overheard her telling a neighbor, "Rachel's my dreamer, Clara's just solid. Just solid. Like concrete underfoot, used, stepped on, never praised." I used to believe love came with loyalty, that if I held the family up long enough, they'd eventually hold me too. But even then, the cracks were beginning to show. And yet, I didn't stop. I couldn't. When Rachel turned 16, Mom let her throw a party with 50 people and a rented karaoke machine. I cleaned up afterward alone while they laughed over leftover cake. It wasn't until much later that I realized I wasn't raising a family. I was being raised to stay small. But that belief wouldn't last forever. Eventually, the girl who held everyone else together would find a way to stand alone, and when she did, she'd no longer ask to be seen. She'd demand it. The night my father left the house didn't fall apart. It just went quiet. No shouting, no slamming doors, just a Sunday evening, the smell of burnt pot roast in the air, and Dad walking out the door in his pressed shirt and polished shoes, like he was going to the store. He never came back. Mom told us it was mutual. "We just drifted," she said, lighting a cigarette with a shaking hand. "But kids feel more than they're told." I knew it wasn't drifting, it was abandonment. A slow suffocation he finally stepped away from. And he didn't even say goodbye to Rachel. I was 12. Old enough to understand what a missing seat at the table meant, but not old enough to know why my mother's grief looked so much like resentment. Not toward him. Toward me. While other kids in my class talked about splitting weekends between homes or who got 2 Christmases, I became the one who didn't talk about home at all. I became the girl who answered calls from the utility company and learned how to forge my mom's signature on field trip forms when no one remembered to sign them. And Mom, well, she folded herself into her job at the clinic like it was a lifeline. Night shifts, double shifts, back-to-backs. She didn't tuck us in. She didn't ask about homework. She just stared past me as if I reminded her too much of what he left behind. Meanwhile, Rachel got softer eyes, lighter duties, and the illusion that everything was still okay. "Don't worry," your sister, Mom would whisper like I was the storm. "She's still young. She deserves her childhood." As if mine had been optional. The worst part, Dad still sent cards for Rachel. Always addressed to just her. To my little girl, he wrote once, ignoring the fact that I'd packed his bags the day he left. One card even had a $50 bill tucked in. Mom held it up and chuckled, "Must be nice to be the favorite," then tossed it to Rachel like a treat. I was right there. I was always right there. No one asked how I was doing. No one noticed when I stopped playing piano. Or when I quit the softball team. I became invisible except when something needed fixing, organizing, or carrying. There was a moment a few months later when I asked Mom if she had ever missed him. She looked up from her coffee, eyes hollow. "Only when the rent's due." Then she sighed. "But at least now I don't have to explain why he always smiled more when you weren't in the room." That's when I realized she didn't just lose a husband. She chose a scapegoat. And I was it. But even scapegoats eventually stop standing still. And soon I'd learn how to run. Rachel always glowed. That soft, unbothered kind of brightness people call natural charm. Teachers adored her, neighbors raved about her, and Mom, well, Mom treated her like a living wish come true. I used to think that glow was something I could earn. If I worked hard enough, cleaned up every mess, and filled every gap our broken family left behind, I'd get a piece of that sunlight too. But no matter what I did, the light never touched me. It was all Rachel. She was younger by 3 years, but somehow always got there first to be celebrated, first to be defended, first to be forgiven. When she quit gymnastics after 2 weeks, Mom said she's exploring. When I dropped out of band because I needed the hours at my diner job, Mom barely looked up from her crossword. "Should have planned better," she muttered. By the time Rachel reached high school, her world had become performance art, drama club, choir, solos, student council. I was the one driving her to rehearsals, sewing buttons on her costumes at midnight, and sitting in the back row with the programs I printed myself. Mom would wave wildly from the front row, teary-eyed always, with a bouquet ready. I'd get a nod if I was lucky. However, the moment that cracked me open came in my senior year when I was accepted into Northwestern on a merit scholarship. I stood in the kitchen, acceptance letter in hand, voice trembling with excitement. "Mom, I did it. Full ride. Business program." She blinked. Northwestern, then she smiled wide and warm. But not at me. Rachel had just walked in holding a brochure from a for-profit art school in LA. "You want to move to California?" Mom asked, lighting up like it was Christmas. "That's bold. I love it." I stood there invisible again, my future folded in half. But I still sent money. That's the part people don't understand. Even after Rachel dropped out of art school within a year, even when she moved back home without a job and stayed glued to the couch for months, I continued to send her money for rent, for utilities, for essentials. And when Mom called to say Rachel needed help getting back on her feet, I wired $3,000 without a second thought. A week later, Rachel posted pictures from Coachella. VIP passes, designer sunglasses, captioned "Healing looks good on me." She didn't tag me. I didn't expect thanks. But I didn't expect to be erased either. And still, that wasn't the part that hurt the most. It was what came next. Soon I'd find out the money I was sending wasn't just funding my sister's glow, it was building a home I wasn't welcome in. The morning of my college graduation, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, adjusting the cap on my head, and wondering if anyone would notice the extra shine in my eyes. It wasn't from joy, it was from holding back tears. I had worked 4 jobs over the last 3 years, pulled all-nighters in library corners, while others partied, and somehow graduated in the top 5% of my class, with a business degree from Northwestern. Not $1 came from home. Not one visit. Not even a voicemail to say they were proud. I told myself they'd surprise me. Maybe Mom and Rachel would show up with flowers, faces lit up like the other families I saw crossing the quad. But as names were called, and families screamed with joy, my name echoed into silence. My diploma felt like paper proof of a race I ran alone. After the ceremony, I checked my phone, just one text from Mom. Make sure you return your gown on time. They charge late fees. Rachel had posted a story of them at brunch, mimosas, laughter, a caption that read, "Celebrating my milestones." I stood in line at the photo tent, watching other graduates pose between their beaming parents. I asked the photographer to take a few solo shots. He tried to make me laugh, saying, "You're the only one here without an entourage." I laughed, but it cracked at the edges. That evening, I went home to my tiny apartment, the one I paid for with barista shifts and consulting internships. I placed my diploma on the shelf next to a framed picture of my grandmother Eleanor. She was the only one who ever believed in my potential. But she'd passed away the summer before. No letter came from Mom. No cake, no card. And yet a week later, Rachel's art blog hit 1,000 followers. Mom threw a dinner party. I wasn't invited. Photos flooded Facebook, Rachel cutting into a 3-tier cake shaped like a paint palette. Mom holding up a glass of wine like she was toasting royalty. Someone commented, "Your family must be so proud of you, Rachel." Mom replied, "She's our shining star." I scrolled through those images in silence. Not because I was surprised, but because I finally understood. Pride wasn't something I could earn in that family. It was reserved, selective, conditional. But what they didn't realize, what they never expected, was that being ignored had a side effect. It made me unstoppable. And the next time they heard my name, it wouldn't be from me. It would be from someone they couldn't ignore. After graduation, I moved to Chicago with a suitcase full of thrift store suits and hope. My first job wasn't glamorous entry-level analyst at a mid-sized firm, but it paid more than anything I'd ever seen. For the first time, I had enough to cover rent, groceries, and someone else's problems. The first call came just 3 weeks in. "Clara, the roof's leaking again." Mom said, her voice tight with urgency. "The handyman says it's at least 1,000. I transferred the money before she finished her sentence. It felt good at first, like I was finally useful in a way that might matter. Maybe I thought if I kept showing up for them financially, they'd show up emotionally. But the requests didn't stop. They escalated. A month later, it was Rachel's car. Her brakes are shot. "Clara, she needs to get to her job interviews. Another 1,000. Then the fridge broke. Then the gas bill doubled. Then Rachel needed help launching her brand. I started setting up automatic transfers, $800 a month for Mom, $500 for Rachel. I didn't question it. That money wasn't charity. It was penance. For leaving. For succeeding. For daring to create a life outside of them. The funny thing is, when you pay people to love you, they stop pretending they would have loved you anyway. Calls became less frequent. Mom's thank yous turned into automated texts. "Got it. Thanks." Rachel rarely responded at all, unless she needed more. When I tried to share a promotion, I earned the conversation turned to her needing a new laptop for creative work. One night I was on the phone with Mom, telling her about a campaign I'd led that landed our company a major client. She cut me off mid-sentence. "That's great, sweetie. Listen, do you think you could spot us another $600 this month? We're a little tight. Spot us." Like I was a bank. Like I didn't bleed for every cent. Then one weekend I visited home. The living room had new furniture. Rachel had a new iPhone. The kitchen granite countertops. Mom shrugged. "Got a great deal?" she said. Rachel laughed. "Manifestation, babe. No one offered me a seat. No one asked about my life in Chicago. I was funding the illusion of a family I wasn't even part of. And I started to realize something chilling. Maybe they weren't broken without me. Perhaps they didn't want me unless I paid the price. But I kept sending the checks, because part of me still hoped that if I gave enough, eventually I'd be enough. What I didn't know yet was how much they'd take before they finally pushed me out for good. It started with a tagged photo. I was scrolling through Facebook on a slow Tuesday night, half watching a documentary and half waiting for an email from a client. Then I saw it, Mom's smile, wide and effortless, framed by streamers and golden balloons spelling family forever. Rachel stood beside her, in a champagne-colored dress, mid-laugh, holding a slice of cake. Cousins, aunts, even Uncle Jerry, who lived 2 states away, all gathered around a backyard I hadn't stepped foot in for over a year. I stared at the picture. My heart knew before my eyes did. I wasn't there. But the weird part, I had been. I remembered that afternoon flying in for what I thought was a family cookout. I brought wine, handmade deviled eggs, and a bouquet for Mom. I helped set up the table and even offered to take photos so everyone could be in the frame. What I didn't know then, standing behind the lens, was that I'd be erased from the final cut. In the photo posted online, I was gone. Cropped, clean, like I'd never been there. The corners of the frame where I'd stood were carefully trimmed. I knew because I remembered the blue dress I wore. Just a sliver of it remained in the bottom left corner, like a ghost no one wanted to acknowledge. I stared at that image for a long time. It wasn't just a missing photo, it was a message. One they didn't have to say out loud anymore. I texted Mom, "Hey, did I do something wrong?" She replied 4 hours later. "What do you mean I sent the picture?" No response. A day passed. Then Rachel posted a new album. Family night. Just us. That phrase cut deeper than any argument could. Just us. I scrolled through more albums, more tags, more curated memories, where my presence was always suspiciously absent. Birthdays, holidays, even my visit to Grandma's old cabin. I'd driven 6 hours to clean the place up. No mention. But Rachel's weekend yoga retreat, a full slideshow. I wasn't being forgotten. I was being removed. And the worst part? They didn't even think I'd notice. As if I didn't scroll. As if I didn't still want to be included. But the thing about ghosts is we see everything. Especially the people who pretend we're dead. That night I stared at the last photo I'd taken with them before the cropping started. I kept asking myself one question: if they could erase me from pictures, how long before they erased me from their lives completely? And the answer came sooner than I thought. A week before Mom's 65th birthday, I bought plane tickets, picked out a navy dress, and ordered a bouquet of lilies, her favorite. I was determined to show up no matter how invisible I'd become. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe showing up was still enough to be seen. Then came the message. "Hey, Clara," Rachel texted, casual as ever. "So, about Mom's party, seating is a little tight. If you didn't get a formal invite, it might be best to skip this one. You understand. No invitation, no call. Just that." I stared at the screen, unsure if I'd misread the words or the years between us. The party I had helped pay for, the caterer's deposit, the custom cake, even the patio heater rental was now an exclusive event. And I was not on the list. I called Mom. No answer. I left a voicemail trying to keep my tone light. "Hey, I was hoping to confirm the time for Saturday. I'll be in town. Let me know." Silence. Rachel posted a teaser video on Instagram. String lights, twinkling champagne flutes, clinking, her voice off camera, laughing. "This is gonna be the party of the year." Someone commented, "Hope Clara's coming." Rachel replied, "This one's just for the core crew." Core crew. It hit me harder than I expected. I'd been holding on to this idea that family was a permanent membership, that blood earned you a seat at the table no matter what. But apparently the family could uninvite you without ever saying your name. I still flew in. Not to crash the party, but because I needed to see it for myself. I needed to know if I was imagining the distance or if it was written in candlelight and place cards. I parked 2 blocks away. From the sidewalk, I saw the glow of string lights through the trees. Laughter clinking glasses, Rachel's playlist blasting classic Motown, like we used to dance to in the kitchen when we were kids. It looked warm. It looked beautiful, and I felt like a stranger watching through frosted glass. No one called. No one checked if I was coming. No one asked where I was. But I didn't knock. I didn't cry. I just stood there holding a wrapped gift in one hand and my pride in the other. And for the first time, I didn't leave it on the doorstep. Because the truth was becoming clearer with every flicker of those lights. I wasn't just forgotten. I was officially uninvited from the life I'd helped build. And yet the part that broke me most was still to come. I didn't find my therapist. She found me. After that birthday, the one I watched from a sidewalk like an unwanted guest, I went back to Chicago. But something stayed behind. It was like a part of me had been locked out too. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I'd sit at my desk staring at spreadsheets that once made sense and feel like a ghost in my own life. My manager, a sharp but kind woman named Ellen, pulled me into her office after a meeting. "You've been quieter than usual," she said gently. "Everything okay at home?" That word felt like a splinter. I think I said I'm not sure I have one. She gave me a card. "Dr. Lena Royce, LCSW. Just talk to her," Ellen said. "You don't have to unpack everything. Just open the suitcase." Dr. Royce's office was warm, soft lamplight, overstuffed chairs, herbal tea. I sat on her couch like I'd been carrying bricks for a decade and finally put them down. For the first 10 minutes, I just cried. I didn't mean to. The tears came before the words. She didn't rush me. When I finally spoke, I expected her to tell me I needed to forgive, to let go, to focus on the good. But instead, she asked a question I didn't see coming. "Clara," she said, "where do you end and they begin?" I blinked. "I don't understand." She leaned in slightly. "You keep giving and giving, hoping it'll make them love you back. But all it's done is teach them that you'll love them whether they show up or not." I felt my stomach tighten. "You're not helping them anymore," she said softly. "You're enabling their indifference. You're paying rent in a house where they've locked the door." It landed like truth always does, quiet but undeniable. "So what do I do?" I asked. "You draw the line. Not out of anger, but out of love for yourself." I went home and stared at my bank app. Transfers scheduled, bills paid, and not one thank you in over a year. I canceled every automatic payment that night, and then I blocked Rachel. Not because I hated her, but because I was tired of being the emergency contact for people who never checked if I was okay. I sat in silence for a long time waiting for guilt, but it didn't come. What came instead was air. But freedom always comes with a cost, and I hadn't yet seen the invoice that was coming next. A week after I canceled the transfers, I received a package I'd sent myself 2 months earlier. Returned to sender unopened. My handwriting on the front, neat and careful, stared back at me like a quiet apology. Inside was the birthday gift I had prepared for Mom. A wooden box I'd spent weeks curating, handmade, sanded stained, lined with velvet. Inside were pieces of our history copies of old family photos I'd restored, a necklace she wore on her wedding day that I had repaired, and a letter I had rewritten over and over. The letter said, "I know we've drifted, but I want to believe we still matter to each other. I want to remember how we used to be." It was still folded untouched. I placed the box on my kitchen table and just sat there staring at it. This wasn't a gift anymore. It was evidence. Evidence that I had been trying. That I'd been reaching across silence and sarcasm, across cropped photos and filtered affection. And they hadn't just let go, they'd let it all rot in a corner without ever bothering to open it. What kind of mother ignores a gift from her eldest child? What kind of daughter keeps giving, hoping for a nod of recognition that never comes? It hit me. Then this wasn't about forgetting. It was about refusal. Refusal to see me as anything other than the backup plan, the emotional ATM, the one who didn't need attention because she handled herself too well. I took the box still sealed and walked it to the dumpster behind my building. Not out of spite, but because I needed to make room in my life for things that weren't constantly being returned. That night I made dinner for one. I poured myself a glass of wine, lit a candle. Not for them, but for me. It was the first time I had eaten without checking my phone, wondering if they needed something. If they'd remember I existed. They didn't. And I started to realize, maybe that was the point. Maybe this whole time I'd been treating absence like a problem to solve instead of the answer it was trying to give me. But even with the gift discarded, I hadn't yet let go of hope. That would come next. Because what they didn't unwrap wasn't just a box. It was their last chance. The invitation wasn't sent to me, but I saw the flyer anyway. A friend from high school posted it, honoring Janice Monroe's lifelong contributions to community health. Banquet and fundraiser, hosted by Rachel Monroe. There was a gold crest at the top, RSVP instructions, and a guest list teaser, family and friends welcome. Family. I read it 3 times, my heart thudding like a warning bell. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere, not even in passing. And yet this event had my fingerprints all over it. I'd helped pay off the credit card debt that let Mom retire early. I'd sent money when the clinic downsized, when the water heater broke, and when Rachel needed a new camera to document the journey. Now they were raising funds in her honor, and I wasn't even a line in the program. Still, I showed up. Not to stir trouble, to see it for myself. The hotel ballroom glowed with crystal chandeliers and linen-draped tables. Laughter floated in waves, guests dressed in elegant jewel tones, clinking glasses of wine. I wore black. It felt appropriate. At the check-in table, I gave my name. The volunteer frowned and scrolled through the list. "Sorry," she said, "we don't have you here. Are you sure you're on the list? I'm her daughter." A pause. Then a tight smile. "Let me check with someone." She stepped away. I stood there, stomach hollowing. 2 minutes later, Rachel appeared. She dressed like an influencer, flowy burgundy gown hair and soft curls, gold necklace I'd once given her for Christmas. "Clara," she said, her voice bright but brittle. "Hey, this is a closed thing. It's a public fundraiser," I said evenly. "I RSVP'd through the link." She glanced around. "Yeah, but the seating's... it's tight." "Then I'll stand." "Clara, please don't make a scene. Make a scene." As if my presence was more disruptive than their erasure. Behind her, I spotted the guest list, printed copies on clipboards. I scanned until I found it. My name was there. Crossed out in pen. Not missing. Removed. I didn't say a word. I walked past her, straight to the ballroom entrance. The doorman hesitated and looked to Rachel, who gave him the slightest shake of her head. He stepped in front of me. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This section is for family and guests only." "Family and guests." I left. Quietly. With dignity, I told myself. But something inside me cracked. Not from exclusion, but from the certainty that they meant it. They didn't want me. And that's when I realized I'd been waiting for their permission to exist in my own story. That wait ended now. Because what happened the next day would force everyone in that room to remember my name. Whether they liked it or not, I didn't expect to see the video. It showed up on my feed the next morning, shared by someone I barely remembered from church. A shaky clip taken during the banquet ballroom lights, glowing soft gold, crystal glasses raised. Everyone turned toward the podium. Rachel stood at the mic, a champagne flute in her hand, her voice clear and confident like she was born on a stage. "There's so much I could say about my mother," she began. "But above all, she taught me strength. She raised me alone. She carried this family with grace when others couldn't." Laughter, soft nods, admiring sighs from the audience. She believed in me when no one else did. Rachel continued. "When people walked away, when they didn't believe in our vision, Mom never let go. She's the reason I'm standing here today." Applause swelled. Glasses clinked. Then came the sentence that burned straight through the screen. She's always been my only real anchor, my only constant. Everyone else just faded. Everyone else. I felt my lungs tighten, my body still. I watched the faces behind her smiling, nodding, drinking in the myth she spun like it was gospel. No one asked where I was. No one corrected the lie. I didn't fade. I bled. I carried. I paid. I sent money when they had none. I booked last-minute flights. I stood in kitchens and grocery lines and behind the scenes for 25 years while she took center stage. Now I was a footnote erased in real time. I played the video again, just to be sure I wasn't imagining the deliberate omission. Each time the toast hurt worse. It was a funeral for my role in their lives, and I hadn't even been invited to bury myself. I closed the laptop. For the first time in years, I felt a kind of grief that didn't come with guilt, only clarity. They weren't going to rewrite history. They already had. But what they didn't know, what they had forgotten in their carefully staged narrative, was that I had one thing they never expected. Proof. Not receipts, payments, or photos. Something bigger. Something they couldn't crop, silence, or delete. Because someone else had seen me, and that person held more power over their future than they could imagine. Tomorrow that someone would say my name into a microphone, and the applause wouldn't be for Rachel, or for Mom, it would be for me. The hotel lobby was empty when I returned the next morning. Quiet, polished humming, faintly with the sound of distant vacuums and clinking dishes from the breakfast buffet. I wasn't supposed to be there, not after being turned away. But something in me refused to leave without a final thread. That's when I heard my name. Clara Monroe. I turned. A tall man in a gray tailored suit stepped forward. His hand extended, his face instantly familiar, though older and softer around the eyes. Professor Halbrook, I said, stunned. He smiled. I almost didn't recognize you. It's been, 10 years? More, I said. You taught strategy at Northwestern. And you were one of the best students I ever had, he said without pause. You used to sit in the front row, always challenging the numbers. I still use your capstone presentation as an example when I mentor. My throat tightened. He continued. I came for the fundraiser, my wife knows Rachel, but when I saw the name Monroe, I hoped it meant you. I didn't know what to say. No one here had said my name with warmth in years. I looked for you last night, he said. You weren't in the room. They said it was full, I replied carefully. He frowned. You helped organize the clinic donation campaign, didn't you? Your name was on the donor outreach list. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I was told I wasn't needed. He studied me for a beat, then said, You know I'm the keynote speaker today. I blinked. You're what the hospital board asked me to talk about: leadership, legacy, and community support. They wanted real stories, not fluff. He smiled. So I changed my speech last night. A pause. I'm going to tell them about you, Clara. About how sometimes the real builders of a family aren't the ones standing in the spotlight, but the ones who kept the lights on. It took everything in me not to break down and cry. Your story matters, he added, lowering his voice, and more people need to hear it. Not from your family, from someone who saw it with clear eyes. He handed me a guest badge. I added you to my list. You'll have a seat up front. I stared down at the name tag. My name, in bold, uncrossed. And suddenly I wasn't just part of the room. I was the reason it existed. But the moment that would truly shift everything wasn't the speech. It was what Mom would do when the truth echoed louder than her silence. The first thing I noticed when I walked into the house again after years of distant silence and suspicion was the chandelier. It wasn't the dusty one from my childhood, the one that flickered and buzzed. This one was modern, gold-framed, draped in crystals that caught the afternoon light like a magazine spread. Beneath it, the dining table had been replaced, too oak-heavy expensive. Velvet chairs lined with silver studs. It looked like a showroom, and I knew exactly who paid for it. I stood in the foyer, clutching the guest badge from the hotel in my pocket, scanning every object like a forensic investigator at a crime scene. New art. A marble backsplash in the kitchen. A wine fridge hums beneath granite counters. Even the flooring had been redone wide oak planks, no creaks. None of this existed when they'd said they were struggling and begged for rent help. When Mom cried about barely keeping the lights on. When Rachel said she was eating ramen every night. That's when I rechecked my credit report. There it was. A maxed-out line of credit in my name opened 3 years ago, still active. I hadn't touched it. But someone had. They'd used my social, my birthday, my identity. Not for survival. For decor. It felt like a slap I didn't see coming. I'd expected coldness, exclusion, but not theft. Not betrayal in ink and interest rates. I confronted Mom in the living room. She didn't deny it. "You never used that account," she said, shrugging. "It was just sitting there. And we paid most of it off. Most." "Do you understand what this does to my credit?" I asked. She waved a hand. "You make more than enough. You're fine. You always bounce back." Rachel entered sipping iced coffee from a gold-rimmed glass. "She's being dramatic," she said without looking up. "It's not like we stole from you. You said we were family." They looked at me as if I were the problem. Like calling out the truth was worse than committing the lie. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I walked to the kitchen and pulled open the drawer where they used to keep unpaid bills and junk mail. Empty. Organized and like the past had been purged along with their guilt. Debt had become decoration. The theft had been lacquered over with polish and pride. But the worst part, I'd let it happen. Until now. Because the next time my name was spoken, it wouldn't be in secret. It would be under oath. Grandma always kept things simple. Black coffee, paperback books with cracked spines, and no sugar-coating of the truth. I hadn't seen the letter until that day, folded neatly inside the leather-bound notebook she used to keep by her bedside, tucked away in a drawer I hadn't opened since she passed. I was at the lake house alone, needing space after confronting Mom about the credit theft. I don't know what pulled me back there. Maybe the smell of cedar and lake air. Perhaps the memory of someone who saw me. The notebook wasn't hidden. It was waiting. On the first page, for Clara. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. Her handwriting was the same small, deliberate, with flourishes at the ends of her letters, like she was still speaking out loud. "My darling girl," it began. "If you're reading this, it means the silence got too loud again." I stopped breathing. "I see things your mother refuses to admit. You've always been the one holding everything together. And for that they resented you? Not because you failed, but because you didn't need them the way they needed you." I read the rest sitting on the porch swing where she used to knit in the afternoons, where I'd sketch while she told stories about her younger years. "You were born to break the pattern," she wrote. "And that scares them. Especially Janice. She raised Rachel to believe the world owed her softness. But she raised you to believe survival was enough." I closed the notebook against my chest, pressing it there like a second heartbeat. It was the first time someone had named it out loud on paper without revision or excuse. At the end of the letter, there was one last line I changed my will, Clara. "You'll understand why soon. Don't let them twist this. You earned it and they know it. That's why they'll hate it." I blinked hard. I hadn't even thought about Grandma's will, but now I understood the strange glances. The avoidance. The tension no one had explained. Grandma had left me more than memories. She'd left me power. The kind that couldn't be cropped from a photo or ignored with a shrug. As I stared out across the lake, the water glittering in the sunset, just like it used to when she was beside me, I realized something else. She didn't just see me. She'd been planning my return long before I knew I needed one. And tomorrow, the reading of her will would rewrite everything. The lawyer's office smelled like lemon polish, and old books, the kind of room where nothing dramatic ever seemed to happen until today. I arrived 10 minutes early wearing a blazer I hadn't worn since my last promotion. My hands trembled slightly, but my spine stayed straight. Grandma had prepared me for this even if no one else had. When Rachel and Mom walked in, the air shifted. Rachel was in designer black sunglasses still perched on her head, like she'd walked off a magazine shoot. Mom gave me a once-over that started at my shoes and ended in a sigh. No one said hello. The lawyer, Mr. Fine, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for being here. Let's begin." He read the formalities first. Legal jargon, date of death, witness names. Rachel tapped her phone. Mom adjusted her pearls. I didn't move. Then came the moment. For the position of executor of Eleanor Monroe's estate, Mr. Fine said, glancing at the page she named Clara Monroe. Rachel blinked. Mom stiffened. What Rachel said, almost laughing. "That has to be a mistake." "It's not," Mr. Fine replied. "It's notarized and witnessed. Clara is to handle all matters of the estate distribution sales final decisions." Mom's voice cut sharp. "But she hasn't been around. She doesn't understand how this family works." "No," I said quietly. "I understand exactly how it works." Rachel stood up. "This is absurd." Grandma barely spoke to her these last few years. I looked straight at her. She spoke to me more than you think, and she saw everything. The silence that followed was heavy. But I didn't flinch. Mr. Fine continued. "Regarding the lake house and its contents, Eleanor leaves them in their entirety to Clara. It is her wish that the property remain untouched by anyone else." Rachel let out a dry laugh. Of course, the one place she thought she owned something. And the lawyer added, flipping the page, Eleanor instructed that a letter be read aloud. He opened an envelope. "To those hearing this, I hope you understand love is not measured by noise or by titles or by who throws the biggest party. It is measured by presence. By who stayed when no one was watching. I've chosen Clara not because she's perfect, but because she was honest. And I trust her to honor what I built, even if it makes the rest of you uncomfortable." Rachel's face flushed red. Mom looked away. I exhaled, not in triumph, but in truth. It wasn't about revenge. It was about finally being seen. But there was still one letter left, one that wasn't in the will. One she had written only for me. And it would change everything I thought I knew. After the will reading, while Mom and Rachel were still arguing in hushed voices in the hallway, Mr. Fine gently motioned for me to stay behind. He opened a locked drawer in his desk and pulled out a small cream envelope, the paper slightly yellowed, sealed with wax. "She asked me to give you this privately," he said. "Not part of the official documents." I took it with both hands, heart pounding. In Grandma's familiar handwriting, it read, "Clara, when you're ready." I opened it on the train ride back to the city. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the single sheet, which was pressed so flat that it looked ironed. The scent of her lavender soap lingered faintly, like a presence still watching over me. "My Clara," it began, "if this letter has reached you, then it means I couldn't say these things aloud, and that you already know more than they ever thought you would." She continued, "I saw the way they treated you. Every phone call ignored. Every effort unseen. You were not a ghost, but they needed you to feel like one, because your light threatened the comfort of their shadows." I blinked hard, tears prickling. "You called me every Sunday," she wrote. "Even when I didn't answer. Even when your mother told you not to bother. I heard your messages. I saved them all. I hadn't known that. I want you to know something without doubt. The silence wasn't mine. It was theirs. I wanted you close, but I knew they'd weaponize my words if I tried too hard." A deep ache settled in my chest. The kind that comes when truth meets years of self-blame. I gave you the lake house because it was the only place they couldn't touch. The only space that ever belonged to you and me. Where you laughed. Where you cried safely. Where you stopped apologizing for dreaming. Then the last line. The one I reread at least a dozen times. "You were never the disappointment, Clara. You were the proof that we could be more." I folded the letter back slowly, my hands steadier now. She had always known. And she had protected me the only way she could, with distance, with quiet, with a final act of truth that couldn't be twisted. But letters like that don't stay hidden forever. Because when Rachel found out I had it, the lie she'd been living cracked, and the performance that defined her began to fall apart. The day after I read Grandma's letter, I logged into my bank account and stared at the scheduled transfers. One to Mom, one to Rachel. They sat there like silent obligations, as familiar as brushing my teeth. Twice a month, automatic, dependable, like me. I hovered my cursor over the cancel button. There wasn't a dramatic soundtrack, no thunderclap of realization, just the click of a mouse and a soft exhale. Years of sacrifice were erased in under 10 seconds. No more transfers. I didn't send an announcement, I didn't owe them one, but I knew what was coming, and it didn't take long. 3 weeks later, my phone lit up. Mom. I let it ring, then Rachel, then again, and again. Finally, I picked up. Clara, Mom said, voice tight, we're behind on the mortgage. You forgot to send this month's payment. I didn't forget, I said calmly. I stopped. Silence. I stopped paying for people who never saw me as family unless I was funding their comfort. She scoffed. This is about the will. You're letting that old woman poison you against us. No, I said. You did that all on your own. She hung up. Then came Rachel. Her message was a string of voice notes, anger, confusion, guilt-tripping, wrapped in performative concern. You know I'm still building my business. You know I can't afford this right now. I thought we were sisters. Sisters. I didn't reply. A week later, Rachel went public. A post on Instagram. A lengthy caption about family betrayal. About someone close using legal tricks to steal what wasn't theirs. Dozens of comments flooded in sympathy fire emojis, people asking for names. I didn't respond. Instead, I poured my energy into restoring the lake house. Grandma's house. My house now. I painted the porch, replaced rotting steps, and pulled weeds until my arms ached. For the first time, my labor was for something that loved me back. As I stood on that porch one evening, watching the sun drop behind the trees, a breeze caught the hem of my shirt and lifted a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for decades. They had always seen my love as currency. And when I stopped paying, they stopped pretending. But I no longer needed their performance. Because what came next wasn't about cutting ties. It was about rebuilding something better with people who showed up not for money, but for me. The first holiday I spent alone at the lake house was quiet. No bickering over mashed potatoes. No forced smiles for family photos. Just the sound of the fire crackling, a soft jazz playlist humming from the old stereo, and a pie cooling on the windowsill made with my own 2 hands. And yet I wasn't lonely. Because that year, for the first time, I chose who sat at my table. I invited Marianne, my co-worker, who'd been quietly battling a divorce. Elijah, the neighbor who'd lost his partner last spring. Ava, my former college roommate who'd never once missed a birthday text. And a few others, people who showed up not out of obligation, but because love asked them to. We sat around the table, laughing, swapping stories, and passing dishes like we'd done for years. And somewhere between the second glass of wine and the third helping of stuffing, I felt something I hadn't in decades. Belonging. There were no power dynamics. No guilt. No silent measuring sticks of worth. Just shared joy, shared presence. One of them raised a toast unexpectedly. To Clara, Marianne said, lifting her glass. For reminding us that family isn't blood, it's who sees you. My eyes burned. Because that's what I'd been searching for all along. Not praise. Not repayment. Not even forgiveness. Just to be seen. The next morning I walked down to the dock, coffee in hand, the lake mirroring the sky. I thought about all the years I'd poured myself into a version of family that only existed when I gave enough. About how long I'd stayed hoping they'd meet me halfway. But they never would. And that was okay. Because here in this place, Grandma gave me not just with deed and pen, but with intention. I was building something new. A life I didn't have to earn. A space I didn't have to prove I belonged in. They hadn't taken my roots. They just reminded me to plant them elsewhere. As I stood there watching the water shimmer under the morning light, I felt something I never expected to return peace. But before I could fully step into this new chapter, there was one final thread to tie off. One last door to knock on. Not for reconciliation, but for release. And what happened next would be the quietest, most powerful ending of all. The last time I stood on my mother's porch, I didn't bring flowers. No gift, no speech, prepared, no need to prove anything. Just a quiet heart, a clear mind, and a letter in my coat pocket, the kind of letter you write not to reconnect, but to release. It wasn't long, just a few sentences handwritten on the same stationery Grandma used to keep on her desk. I forgive you not because you asked, but because I refuse to carry what you refuse to face. I am not bitter. I am not broken. I am done. I placed it in the mailbox and walked away. No knocking, no second guessing. And in that moment I realized that the stranger they tried to make me into had become someone they could no longer define. For most of my life, I thought being part of a family meant staying even when staying hurt. I thought loyalty meant sacrifice. That love meant constantly proving my worth. But that version of love, it drained me. Real love, true-rooted love, doesn't ask for your silence. It doesn't demand your suffering as proof of devotion. It sees you. It celebrates you when no one's looking. It makes space at the table not just when it's convenient, but because it would feel empty without you. I found that love not in the place I was born into, but in the life I built with intention. With people who brought casseroles and blankets when my pipes froze. Who remembered my birthday without a Facebook reminder. Who cried when Grandma's letter was read aloud because even they knew how long I'd waited to be chosen. I kept the lake house, restored it. I filled it with warmth, laughter, slow dinners, and loud board games. There's a small plaque on the mantel now that reads, "You were never the disappointment. You were the proof we could be more." That was Grandma's line, and now it's mine. Every fall I host a found family feast. No RSVP is required. Just bring a dish and a story. One woman came last year with her dog and said it was the first holiday she hadn't spent alone in a decade. A retired teacher brought a peach cobbler and stayed until midnight. We sang old songs and passed around old photos, and no one asked what anyone had done to deserve love. Because that's the beauty of becoming whole. You stop chasing rooms that won't open. You start building homes that welcome others in. And that porch where I was once turned away, it's just a house now. But this life I've built, this is family. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own story, I hope you know it's never too late to rewrite the ending. Subscribe to catch more inspiring stories. You never know, one of them might help you find your way home.